I was 24 years old when this happened, and what still scares me the most is how ordinary everything felt before it started. Nothing was wrong in my life. I had just graduated college, landed a decent job, and moved into a small one-bedroom house that I could barely afford, but felt proud of. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. No roommates, no noise, no arguments, no one else's mess. Just me and my space. The house itself was older, built sometime in the late 70s, with thin walls and creaky floors, but it sat in a quiet neighborhood where nothing ever happened. Families lived there, retired couples, the kind of place where you don't expect danger. That sense of safety is probably what made everything so much worse. The night it happened was a Tuesday. I remember that clearly because Tuesdays were my longest work days, and by the time I got home, it was already dark. I pulled into my driveway a little after 9:30 p.m. and sat in my car for a moment before getting out. Across the street, one of the porch lights was flickering on and off. I remember watching it and feeling strangely unsettled, even though I couldn't explain why. The street was completely silent. No cars driving by, no people outside, not even the sound of wind in the trees. When I got out of my car, the air felt heavy, like the night was pressing down on everything. I walked up to my front door, unlocked it, and stepped inside. I locked it behind me out of habit, sliding the deadbolt into place and checking it twice. Inside, everything looked exactly the way I'd left it that morning. I kicked off my shoes, dropped my keys on the counter, and turned on the lights. The familiar hum of the refrigerator and the soft buzz of the ceiling light made me feel calm again. I microwaved some leftovers and ate standing at the counter, scrolling through my phone. Nothing out of the ordinary. No missed calls, no strange messages. Around 10:15, I turned off most of the lights and headed to my bedroom at the back of the house. The hallway light stayed on, casting a dim glow down the narrow corridor. I got into bed and started watching videos on my phone, slowly drifting towards sleep. That's when I heard it.
At first, it was so faint that I almost ignored it. A soft thump, like something being set down gently. I froze and listened. The house was quiet again. I told myself it was nothing. Old houses make noise. I'd heard random sounds before, pipes knocking, floorboards creaking, the wood adjusting to temperature changes. I rolled over and stared at the wall. Then I heard it again. This time, there was no mistaking it. It wasn't just a thump. It was followed by a dragging sound, slow and deliberate, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. My heart started beating faster. I sat up in bed, holding my breath, trying to pinpoint where it was coming from. Somewhere closer now, somewhere inside the house. The sound stopped. That silence felt wrong. It wasn't the natural quiet of a house at night. It felt intentional, like whatever made the noise had stopped because it knew I was listening. I felt a tight knot form in my stomach. I tried to convince myself I was being paranoid. I was tired. My mind was filling in gaps that didn't exist. A few seconds later, I heard a quiet click. It took my brain a moment to process what that sound meant. When it finally did, my chest felt like it dropped. It was the unmistakable sound of a door handle being gently tested, turned just enough to see if it would open. I knew I had locked the front door. I always locked it. The back door too. I never used it, which meant it stayed locked all the time. My hand started shaking as I grabbed my phone and slid out of bed as quietly as I could. I didn't turn on any lights. I didn't want whoever was out there to know exactly where I was. Then I heard footsteps. They weren't heavy or rushed. They were slow and careful, like whoever was walking was trying very hard not to make a sound. Each step felt measured, controlled. The sound of them moving down the hallway made my skin crawl. I stood frozen in my bedroom doorway, staring into the darkness. That's when I saw it.
The hallway looked wrong. The nightlight near the bathroom was on, but the light wasn't reaching all the way down the hall like it usually did. Something was blocking it. At first, my brain refused to understand what I was seeing. Then the shape shifted slightly. Something tall was standing there. I could only see the outline, a dark shape against the dim light, a shadow where no shadow should be. My stomach dropped, and a wave of cold fear washed over me. I heard breathing, slow, steady breathing that wasn't mine. Whoever it was stood completely still, like they were listening for me. I didn't scream. I couldn't. My body felt locked in place. Every instinct told me to run, but I knew moving would give me away. Slowly, I stepped backward into my bedroom and closed the door as gently as I could, even though I knew it didn't lock. I backed into the corner near my bed, clutching my phone, barely daring to breathe. Then the footsteps started again. They moved closer. Each step felt louder than the last, even though they were still careful. They stopped right outside my door. I could see the shadow under the crack at the bottom, shifting slightly as whoever it was leaned closer. I heard fabric move, like a jacket brushing against the door. The breathing was louder now. Then the door handle turned, slowly. The wood creaked softly as the door opened just a little, not enough for them to come in, just enough to let me know they could. I stood there in silence, my heart pounding so hard I was sure they could hear it. I thought for sure that door was going to open all the way, but it didn't. After a few seconds that felt like hours, the handle turned back. The door closed. I heard the footsteps retreat down the hallway, moving away from my room. I stayed frozen in that corner for a long time, too scared to move. I didn't know if they were really gone or just waiting for me to come out. When I finally called the police, my voice was shaking so badly I could barely explain what had happened. When the officers arrived and searched the house, they found no one, no signs of forced entry, no damage, nothing out of place, except the back door. It was unlocked. I know I locked it. I moved out 2 weeks later. Even now, years later, I still check my doors over and over before I can sleep. And sometimes, when the house is quiet, I swear I can still hear someone breathing just outside my door. I was 31 years old and living completely alone in a small apartment on the 3rd floor of an old building downtown when this happened. I had lived there for nearly 2 years without a single problem, which is why that night caught me so off guard. I worked from home, so I spent most of my time by myself, and over those 2 years I had learned every sound the building made. I knew the pipes that knocked when someone upstairs used the shower. I knew the dull thumps of neighbors walking down the hallway. I even knew the exact sound my front door made when it closed. That familiarity made me feel safe. It made me believe that if something was wrong, I would know immediately. The night it happened, it was raining harder than I'd heard in a long time. The rain hit the window so loudly that it almost drowned out everything else. I went to bed around 11 p.m. after watching TV, leaving the apartment quiet except for the rain and the low hum of the city outside. I remember lying in bed, drifting in and out of sleep, when I heard a sound that didn't belong. It was faint at first, like something scraping gently against the floor. I opened my eyes and held still, listening. The rain continued, steady and loud, but the scraping came again. This time it was followed by a dull thud, like something being set down carefully. My heart started to race. I told myself it was probably a neighbor or something falling in another apartment, but deep down, I knew the sound was coming from inside my own place. I sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. I knew I was alone. I always locked my door. I checked it every night before going to sleep. I grabbed my phone and slowly got out of bed, trying to be as quiet as possible. The air felt thick, and my hands were already starting to shake. When I cracked open my bedroom door, the first thing I noticed made my stomach drop. The living room light was on. I was absolutely certain I had turned it off before going to bed. I stood there, frozen in place, staring into my living room. At first glance, everything looked normal. The couch was where it always was, the table, the TV, nothing seemed disturbed. Then, my eyes drifted toward the front door. The closet next to it was open. I never left that closet open, ever. I always closed it because it cast strange shadows at night. Seeing it open made a cold wave of fear wash over me. I stared at the dark space inside, my heart pounding so loudly I was afraid it would give me away. That's when I heard movement. Not a large movement, just a subtle shift. Then, breathing. Slow, controlled breathing coming from inside the closet. I felt my legs go weak. For a second, I couldn't move at all. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, but fear kept me frozen. I slowly backed into my bedroom and closed the door, locking it. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. I tried calling the police, but the call wouldn't go through. No signal. I tried again and again, but nothing worked. The rain outside seemed even louder now, like it was closing me off from the rest of the world. Then I heard the closet door close. The sound was soft, careful. Whoever was out there didn't want to be heard. Footsteps followed. They moved slowly across the living room floor, each step placed deliberately. I stood in the middle of my bedroom, staring at the door, barely breathing. The footsteps stopped right outside. I could see the shadow under the door shift as the person leaned closer. Then, I heard whispering. I couldn't understand the words, but I could hear the voice clearly. It sounded like they were talking quietly to themselves, almost calmly, as if they weren't in any hurry. That terrified me more than anything else. They weren't panicked, they weren't rushing, they were comfortable. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from crying. Tears streamed down my face as I stood there, completely silent. Every second felt stretched out, unbearable. I was convinced they were going to try the door handle, but they didn't. After what felt like an eternity, the shadow moved away. The footsteps retreated slowly, crossing the living room. I heard the front door open, letting in the sound of the rain, and then close again. I didn't move for a long time. I stayed locked in my bedroom until I finally managed to get a call through to the police. When they arrived and searched my apartment, they found signs that someone had been inside for hours. They told me the closet was large enough for someone to hide in comfortably, and that the person likely knew my routine. I never slept in that apartment again. Even now, when I hear rain hitting my windows at night, I remember that whispering voice outside my door and wonder how long they had been watching me before I ever noticed.